It's my favorite evening. I'm pacing around the floor. Got southern woods and waters gonna take me out the door. Got coffee on a perkin. I'm about to have some fun. They'll have my mind chasing some critter on the run. Bring it on, southern woods and waters. Make me hear that sound of a fish that's breaking water or the bawling of some hounds. Make me smell that river mud, feel clean air on my face. Bring it on, southern woods and waters, show me that special place.
Probably about 11-inch crappie.
Good evening, everybody. We want to welcome you all to this week's edition of Southern Woods and Waters. Got a really exciting show for you guys tonight, and really more informational than anything. We've been going over our series this year as far as our preseason deer series, and tonight we've got a subject that can actually at times be kind of controversial in the deer hunting world, but we're going to cover this tonight and kind of go over it and give y'all our opinions on it and how we do it. And what I'm talking about is aging deer on the hoof. That is something that I have seen more arguments over and had more questions for sure over the years than just about anything else deer hunting related, is how do we age deer when they're in the field, you know, on the hoof. So joining with me tonight, I've got my good friend Wes Stone in the house, and I always love having you here, Wes, and having you on to talk with me. And we're going to go over to the farm here in a minute and look at some footage that we've actually put together over the last few years and give some examples of deer in the different age classes that you'll see, and kind of what to expect to see here in the state of Tennessee, you know. Because Wes, it's not the same everywhere. I mean, you do a lot of hunting in Illinois,
right? And
it's going to be a different set of video. You look at Illinois as far as the way, and it's going to be different in Florida. It's going to be different in Alabama, you know. So exactly tonight right. we're gonna focus on the deer here in Tennessee and just some of the characteristics that we look for and the behaviors that we see in these deer, and the things that help us to determine their age and whether they're mature or still an immature deer. So I tell you what, let's go on over to the farm right now, check out some footage and see what we got. We'll see you back in the studio in just a minute.
Well, on tonight's show, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about how to age bucks while they're on the hoof out in the field. Now, this is not an exact science, and it cannot be done to where we just know that we're 100% accurate all the time. So a hunter's got to use his own judgment, his own experience over time to be able to determine how old a deer is on the hoof. We're going to start out tonight with our 1.5-year-old buck class, which is by far the easiest one to determine age-wise as you're out in the field. These bucks look more just like a doe. If you look at the doe in this video right here, a 1.5-year-old buck is pretty much going to look just like this doe does, but with antlers. So that's the best way to go ahead and determine whether a buck is a 1.5 years old or not, is does it just look like a doe that's got antlers. They're typically going to be feeding in groups with does or other deer. Even throughout the rut time, you're going to see a lot of times where a 1.5-year-old buck will be hanging out with a group of does. He might get frisky and chase them around a little bit, but he doesn't quite show the characteristics that a 2.5-year-old buck, an older buck, will show. He is mainly just trying to learn the ways of the world and get out there and move around with the herd and kind of figure out his place at this point in his life. Now, it is at this age that a pecking order, so to speak, is starting to be established. These bucks, even at a 1.5 years old, they're ready to show off their stuff and push each other around and kind of see who the biggest boy on the block is. Now, this kind of, as they get older, is already determined. They know, and you'll see in some of this later video footage, as they get older, they kind of don't mess with one another nearly as much. And it usually just takes a quick look or a lowering of the head to let one of them know it's time for him to get out of the way and let the other one have his space. Now, starting at 2.5 years old, these bucks start to act a little bit more like a buck, or as we would like to envision them. they start to gain a little bit more muscle mass. Their neck's going to start getting a little bit of swell as we come into the rut season, but they still don't have that big mature look to them. They're going to put on more antlers at this point in time and be a little bit more careful. One thing that gets them into a lot of trouble in this particular age class is this is when they really start to get frisky and start figuring out that they want to be after those does in November. And at their age, they're almost, they're old enough to know better, but still too young to care. As you've heard that before, that's kind of how these bucks act. So they slip up a lot during the season, especially during the rut, and they're a great deer to watch to learn deer activity and deer movement. You're going to see these deer very active in the daylight, working scrapes and rubbing trees and things like that, and it's a great way to watch deer and learn how they interact with these 2-year-old bucks, because they are some of the funnest deer to watch in the woods. Now I want to take just a second to note the reason you keep hearing the half-year-old added to these ages. Now, because of when deer are born, by the time it comes around to each hunting season, they're typically that age and a half a year. So they're either 2.5 years, 3.5 years, 4.5 years, and so on and so forth. Now you'll notice that this buck's missing half of his rack, or at least has been broke off on his main beam there on the left side. You'll see this pretty common in 2-year-olds because they're still establishing dominance, but now they've got a lot more body weight and headgear to push each other around with. And you'll see a lot of 2-year-olds that'll have busted tines and broken main beams, and a lot of that comes from just fighting back and forth with one another, especially earlier in the season, sometimes even pushing each other around in the summer when their antlers are a lot softer than they are during the main season, and this causes a lot of your 2-year-olds to be running around with broken antlers. Now, 3.5 years old in age, in my opinion, that's the toughest buck to let walk past you. This is when the guys that want to shoot a mature buck run into the biggest problems, because at 3 years old, these deer look good, they look big, and it's really tempting at this point to go ahead and take that deer. Now, for those that want to, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. But if you're looking to try to take a mature deer, the 3.5-year-old class range is the hardest one to let go. You can see this buck running around me that morning, and it was sure tough to lay off the trigger. And as a matter of fact, I had the same buck in front of me in bow season and let him go then. Now that's tough at the time, but this year I've already got pictures of this same deer standing over one of my mineral sites, and I can tell you, if I catch up with him this year in 2020, I'm going to be a lot happier. Now once the rut rolls around, 3-year-olds are almost constantly on the move. They're your cruisers. They're running back and forth all the time looking for does. It's just almost a relentless pursuit trying to find a doe at all times. That's why a lot of times once you have one using your area, you'll see him multiple times throughout the season. Now these next couple of bucks that you're going to see here that were in the 3.5-year-old range are two of the bucks that gave me the toughest time over the years passing them up. I had wonderful opportunities at both of these deer multiple times over a couple of seasons, and I was able to hold off on that trigger just because I knew that they would become special deer. Now the 10-pointer that you see in the field, that buck was not quite as big the next year as you would have expected. As he matured out, he stayed about the same size, and I went ahead and took him and was completely tickled with doing that. But the 8-pointer, the wide deer that was in that field, the next season grew quite a bit and became one of the greatest deer that I've ever taken so far in my life. Okay, now let's talk about mature deer. First thing I want you to notice in this clip here is look how quick the 3-year-old buck in the top of this screen bows out and steps away from the more mature and much more aggressive 4-year-old in the bottom of the screen. There's no fight, there's no pushing around. It doesn't take any time at all before that other buck knows he needs to get out of the way. That's one of the number one things to look for when a mature buck enters the field, is he will get immediate response from the other bucks in the field, and they will clear the way for him in most cases. So that's one way to know that that's going to be your mature buck in the area. Also want to stress that antler size, while it plays into one of the factors when aging deer, not all deer are going to mature out to have a big rack. So many people want to reach for that 150-inch range buck and bigger, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, we all love those big antlers, but a lot of your mature bucks are going to mature out in that 125 to 135, 140 range in the state of Tennessee, and there's nothing shabby about that at all. So again, I'm looking for body size. I'm looking for the way that they interact with other deer. You can learn more about aging deer and determining age structure by simply watching deer in their natural environment while not pulling the trigger on your gun than you can in any other way. Regardless of whether you're after a good 1.5-year-old buck or if you're wanting to hold out for a big mature deer, I wish you guys luck, and I hope this video helped.
All right, welcome back, guys. Hope that kind of helped lead us into what we're going to be talking about tonight, and just gave y'all something to kind of keep in mind as we're going through the night talking about different age classes. Right now, though, what we're going to do, we're going to go on over and do this week's wild game forecast. It's being sponsored by the great folks over at Wilson Bank and Trust. You guys can stop in at one of 28 Middle Tennessee locations and talk to them about all your banking and financial needs. And they want to remind you to all your students going back to school in the fall to get off the right foot with their new campus checking. Be sure to ask them about that and tell them thank you for everything they do for us right here at the show. All right, well, Wes, forecast for the velvet hunt coming up in a couple weeks is pretty darn good, isn't it?
It don't look bad, does it?
It don't look bad at all.
I just wish I had a bigger one spotted.
Well, I've had one that's been fairly consistent the last few weeks coming into, we did a little food plot that I actually planted earlier than I normally would because of time, and I don't always get to put them in right when I want to, and we put one in a little early, and it just might pay off for me. I've got winter wheat coming up about an inch and a half high right now, and so far they've been coming to it and eating, so we'll see what happens. But we saw a lot of deer this evening just driving down here. You know, they're out moving around doing their thing.
Rain coming in, and so they're moving this
Well, this is a cold front. What you got to keep in mind is when it's 95 outside, 85 is a cold front, and to the deer, that's cold front. They're going to move on it, and they've really moved the last few days. Yeah, they have. Temperature change has done it. Fish are still biting good. Crappie right now for us, 14 to 18 feet of water. We've had real good luck on Percy Priest. Been catching some sauger on Cordell Hole. They're kind of hanging 20 foot deep or so, 20, 25 feet. Having a good time with them though. Fish are biting well. Dayton Blair had a good day out bass fishing yesterday, so they're starting to do well. Top water bite's still good early in the morning. So all in all, wild game forecast looking really good. A lot of doves in here too, Wes. I want to hit on that real quick. If you start looking to power lines driving up down the road tomorrow, you'll notice there are a lot of doves around right now.
It does look like a good
hopefully come September the 1st, it's going to be a barrel burner out there. We want to remind you guys to follow us on Facebook. We got a giveaway going on right now that's unlike any we have done. We're actually giving away a chance to come and dove hunt with us this year. Come out and enjoy the day with us and hunt with us, eat with us, have a good time. So you want to get over to Facebook, get that filled out, and get registered to do that, because we're going to draw the winner for that next Thursday night. So be sure to follow us on Facebook and get yourself registered, because that's going to be a good time, I promise you.
That'd be a good trip.
We're going to have a good time doing that. Find us at swwtv.com. You can find links to all of our great sponsors there and all of our past shows. We'll be right back here in just a minute with this week's Pictures of the Week and some more Southern Woods and Waters.